We've got Alicia Tappan with us. She is the founder of Survivor-Led Solutions. This is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. Alicia, tell us a little bit about your organization.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, Rick. So, Survivor-Led Solutions was really birthed out of an idea of getting on my own as a survivor and wanting to do the work to help the long-term needs of survivors who are trying so hard to create a new pathway for other women and men to come forward who've been victimized. So, we do a top-down approach, meaning we work with survivors who are in leadership positions, helping cultivate more professional development through contracts, public speaking gigs, training, and then also a bottom up approach, meaning we work with the women who are coming out of incarcerated situations and are in recovery and walking along their healing path.
Talk about the incarceration part, because we talked about it a little bit before, and a lot of people may not realize that a lot of trafficking victims end up in jail.
Yeah, as a PhD student, I was doing research and looking at the demographic of, what is a survivor. And really, it starts in childhood. A lot of kids who are trafficked will at some point become incarcerated because of their behaviors, whether it's truancy from school or acting out crimes that were committed. So I was seeing it a lot there. And then the narrative of our own community, when we recover trafficking victims, we're actually looking at victims in criminal situations, meaning that law enforcement wasn't really trained to see those victims. So they were always the perpetrator. Then, as you continue to move down this narrative, you started to understand that the research and the lack of restorative justice programs across the nation, we were finding that a lot of survivors, in some point of their life, whether in childhood or as an adult, prostitution included, that we had victims being incarcerated.
Now, when we look at this, what's the state of human trafficking here in the Panhandle? I know, gosh, I think it was 2005 or so, we wrote a story about human trafficking because a victim who was almost trafficked outside of the area. And that back then we found, just with a little bit of research, that we really are on a pipeline here because of I-10. People, that young girls are being trafficked around us. We also later learned of Eastern Europe immigrants coming in and being trafficked as labor for restaurants and cleaning crews for hotels and condos. And that was a big bust there. Then we had, gosh, recently the massage parlor industry here. We had a big arrest there. What are you seeing with human trafficking here?
Sure. And I'm glad that you brought up all those different scenarios because it is diverse. So, number one, Florida's ranked number 3 out of 50 with calls to the human trafficking hotline. That means two things to us. One, we have vigilant advocates who are out there being mandated reporters and calling what they see. That's great. The other thing is, though, is that we have a lot of what's called familial sex trafficking, meaning that there are generations of families who have gotten by, unfortunately, selling their children to make ends meet. So food, water, shelter is really the main feature. And those kids are typically reported to our Department of Children and Families, and we are now being able to track them. They're called commercial sexually exploited children, CSEC. And that what's very unfortunate is that Escambia County is the highest number of CSEC identified children in our circuit in all 4 counties.
Yeah. Now, you yourself are a survivor. Talk just a little bit about that and
Sure.
the struggles of recovering from that.
Yeah, it's a journey. As I was talking to a couple of survivors I met today, just, I get one-on-one calls all the time. And when I start to share that this was something that happened to me as a 17-year-old child who grew up in a middle-class neighborhood with both parents, I was the it shouldn't happen to me sort of kid because I had so much education. I was this honor roll student, student council president, National Honor Society president. It shouldn't happen to me, right? If we were looking at the media demographic. And what is unfortunate is people don't understand that kids are victims because they're vulnerable just because of their age. So we don't have all of our brain capacity to rationalize when somebody's lying about who they are. And in my situation, it was a coach who was posing as a predator. He seemed like a good guy, and he was hired in to be this male track coach. But what he had was an underground ring that he had created through popularity and appearing like a father to the fatherless, meaning that he would take care of his athletes if they did stuff for him. And even though I wasn't a male track student, right, I was still invited to his house when we had an end of the year track meet, and he had gathered students together to celebrate, parents and faculty included. And then he sort of dispersed everybody and said, hey, it's Friday, you guys can go home, but if the kids want to hang out, much like you would at a youth group or a Boy Scouts, or anywhere where kids meet and there's a supervised adult, we thought we were safe. And then it turned into the nightmare, right? And he drugged us. He made his own date rape drug. He had us in very vulnerable situations. He recorded what is essentially child rape and sold it as porn online. But he also covered his tracks, and he had people in high places that would help build his credibility and cover up, the crimes he was committing. But I will tell you this, I was only one out of 33 other victims. I was just the one who was brave enough to come forward and tell my story. And I was silenced twice when I tried to tell, but I was lucky to have one of those mandated reporters that we talk well about. And my athletic director saw a change in my behavior. I went from this A student to now in my senior year, I was skipping school and getting suspended. I'm getting in fights. There's a lot of rumors going around about me. And I didn't have the self-confidence anymore to really state my truth until he pulled me aside. And I gave him, I think, what any kid would do, this really blunt version of like, I don't know, I think I was raped. And he started an investigation. Law enforcement got involved, and we found out that I was one of 33 other victims. He had these kind of gangs in school before mine, my school, and then another school. And he had gotten away with for 10 years victimizing children. So we put him in jail. A lot of people ask, like what happened? It took 2 years and a lot of trauma to get through the court process. But we were able to put him in prison. He gets out, though, in 7 years. And he starts his law degree. He gets his law degree and becomes an executive of an estate where he embezzles $140,000 from a family in 4 months. And lucky for me, he had the same judge that we had 10 years before. And so I actually have a newspaper article that in essence says, if it wasn't for the girl in the hot tub, me, we wouldn't know how evil this man was. And now he's in prison for the rest of his life. So that's just like a very small version of it. But it took me, from 17 to 22 to even understand what really happened. And then from 22 to almost 30 of re-exploiting myself, working in the escort industry, being in the strip clubs when online dating came out, that was an easy fix. And I'll tell you, without intentional support with people who really cared, my mom included, what became my husband now of 10 years, seeing the potential of my ability to entrepreneur and lead people, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Rewiring of the brain. Let's talk a little bit about that, because that plays into it as far as how you can become whole, how you can survive. Talk about
So,
that.
like any addiction, you have to admit you have a problem.
Hmm.
And as we talk about the rewiring, so if I was a child and the brain doesn't fully develop until I'm 25, from 17 to 25, my brain is still trying to figure out how to work, right? It's very plastic, it has a lot of plasticity, so it's moldable and shapeable. So any environment will have, a product to my brain. So if I was in unhealthy relationships, that's going to define how I see relationships. And since now my real experience of late teenage relationships were always very violent and always very sexual, I assumed that that's how men treated women. So now I don't understand healthy relationships. Being able to make fast cash. I don't have an appreciation for hard work anymore because I know how to make it quick and I know how to leave quickly. So I'm a quitter. I make a lot of money, right? And I burn people on the way out. So I was a heartbreaker. In reality, I would go in, try to find somebody who was vulnerable and take advantage of them because hurt people hurt people. And I didn't really see myself as the victim. I saw myself as somebody who was trying to survive. And then once I got to my 25th birthday, I remember very clearly, I went to go buy a dress. And it was at the Coach store on Honolulu, which is a long story, but I was in Honolulu. I was actually homeless, but I had fast cash, right? So I go in and I buy this dress, and I remember the manager come up to me and be like, "So you got daddy's credit card?" And I looked at him like I could have cut him with my eyes, right? And I was like, nope, that's my money, you know? And just so that mentality, you know, you got to survive, you got to make money fast, you'll do anything to get what it takes, you're willing to hurt people. Meanwhile, you're being drugged, you're being raped, you're being put into positions where you don't have a ride out. And so you become very angry. And it's all shoved down into the pit of your stomach in order to get to the next day. So it wasn't until I was honestly until I was 30 that I realized like I probably have a problem. And by the time I was 33, married and had my first two children, that I realized I still had a problem. And I was working in the advocacy field. You know, I was working as an executive director for a safe house. I still was an alcoholic and I still did drugs pretty regularly to cope with all of the things that I was doing. Even though I had been in intensive therapy, I have done EMDR, equine therapy, art therapy. I was so hungry to heal, but I was looking still at my vices to make me get through the weekend. So in 2022, I actually put myself in rehab. And for the first day, I slept. Second day, I finally ate 3 meals a day. It was until I had met another like alcoholic, right? And I'm talking about law enforcement working in rehab with me, like, you know, making friends that people who had these addictions too. I realized, you know, it wasn't my addiction that was holding me back. It was actually a psychological issue. I also had a hormonal issue. So I didn't have serotonin in my brain because my brain was so used to keeping me safe. It would black out, right? It would forget things. It would put me in positions where I was just like, well, if nobody gets hurt, then it's fine. And it's not true. So going through rehab really did save my life in the later part of my healing. So now I'm almost 3 years sober and I can see myself in different places where I was not healed. And, you know, working with the survivors that I do, especially those who are coming out of incarceration, you know, they don't know it's okay to be angry. They keep telling me all the time I'm not, but yet they're, you know, quick and irritable and tempered. And I'm like, but it's okay, right? Like you've been through some stuff and your behavior now is actually pretty normal and common for what you've been through. You just don't know anybody else who's gone through what you've been through. And so that's how we heal each other as we work.
You've got a big event coming up this month. Talk about it. This is one of the coolest events. I've thought about it a lot, and it's just, it hits on all the right points with
Yeah.
awareness, survivors, people taking care of their own victims, taking over their narrative. Uh,
Yes.
it's really, really cool event. So tell us about it.
Sure. So it's coined because I wore this. That simple. It's not a gala. It's not just like a fundraising event. It's a demonstration. And I have to give props to my college professor from UWF my freshman year. She gave us this assignment to create an awareness project, and we called it the Classroom Clothesline Project. And we hung up shirts all over campus that said, you know, percentage of domestic violence victims. So we knew back then 1 in 4 women were going to be exploited. In my experience working with survivors, the common question they get asked when arrested is, what were you wearing? And even though they were the victim, this narrative silences them because it's assumed I had something to do with it. And it has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with the perpetrator, right? So we are teaching law enforcement how to reframe that question at the same time as we are empowering these survivor voices. Tell them why. Because what they really want to know is, are you wearing the outfit you were assaulted in because it has evidence on it? Instead of, what were you wearing because now you're assimilated with some negative connotations. So at the event, we showcase what women were wearing on mannequins displayed all over the event space. And it can be anything from little girls' pajamas to military uniforms, business and casual. And it shows you it doesn't matter, right? In the same time, at this event, we not only have survivor testimonies talking about their incarceration process and how they're healing to their long-term healing process of what does it look like for a mental health survivor 10 years later. But we also are giving out some awards to our local law enforcement who have gone above and beyond. So we're really excited to give out those awards. And then at the end, which is the big hoorah, right, are these survivors whose outfits are displayed everywhere come out in their formal wear. And the theme this year is, what do you want to be when you grow up? So you can hear not only like, yeah, I've been through some hard things, but I want to be a mom. I want to be a nurse, a paralegal. I just don't want to be afraid anymore, you know, and they get to really bring back their truth. And so we put that out for the community to see and hopefully, you know, empower others to come forward.
All right, give us the specifics about it.
So it's January 30th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Maserati dealership, Step One Automotive on Pensacola Boulevard. And it's a business slash formal attire wear. So we want you to get dressed up with us and have fun. There'll be some live music, some food with Coralyn's Custom Creations, and Tap the Coast. We'll have our cocktails and mocktails. But it's really just an opportunity to empower one another. It's a fun event. We're not going to, you can cry, but it's not required because we really want you to have a good time. 16 and up, men and women, everybody's invited.
All right, and how does someone get tickets?
Sure. So we do have an Eventbrite, and if you just look it up through Because I Wore This, or you can go to our website at survivorledsolutions.org, and we're on Facebook and Instagram.
Great. Alicia, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rick, for having us. Hope we see you there.
Ah.